Hi everybody, Dr. White coming at you with a Module 3 check-in. So this is the first of two videos that I'll be uploading today. In this one, I'm going to review a couple of the conference abstracts and offer some feedback on them. This, of course, is in addition to the peer review feedback you'll be receiving, and it's going to follow the same format as my Module 2 feedback video, where I looked at a couple of representative examples and I guided you through some of the language and the style that marks a successful document. So this should be pretty short because they're short documents, so if you could take a second right now and open up the discussion board thread for the conference abstracts, CFPs, and peer reviews, we'll be on the same page. All right, so if we're looking at this particular page, I want to actually begin here with, let's see, which one should I start with? I had it picked out. Let's pull from here we go. This would be a good place to start. Okay, so let's actually take a look about halfway down the page at Danielle Pavon. Danielle, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. My apologies if I'm messing it up. Let's take a look at Danielle's paper. So Danielle does, first of all, a really great job of just organizing her post. It's easy to read. She gives us the CFP, the title of her project, and then her actual proposal. So the title of the conference is the International Conferences on Cancer Diagnostic and Treatment 2018, and the CFP indicates that the conference invites all experts around the world to attend the International Conferences on Cancer Diagnostic and Treatment 2018 to be held in Oslo from 2nd to 3rd August 2018, and the theme is Torch Your Light to Develop a Cancer-Free World. So if you'll notice, the CFP also lists directors, professors, researchers, oncologists, excuse me, members of the discourse community and communities of practice involved. So something that this should really clue you into if you're reading this CFP is who's involved, not just in terms of discourse community and community of practice distinction, but in terms of different audience needs and concerns. So for instance, a cancer specialist is probably not going to go to the same panels as students, who are probably going to go to different panels than statisticians or medical oncologists. So what that'll tell you is it's a big conference, first of all, but aside from that, you're going to have lots of kind of sub-audiences to look at with different concerns and thoughts. So you, even within this big field, you need to have a somewhat narrowly defined sense of audience there. So let's go ahead and let's see what Danielle gives us. So the rise in out-of-pocket costs for chemotherapy medications. This paper discusses the average out-of-pocket costs that patients pay for their prescription anti-cancer medications. Outcomes for cancer treatment have been improving over the years, and the price of cancer treatment has also been increasing alongside survival rates. Patients must be able to afford all the various procedures that are included in their treatment, and although health insurance plays a large role in paying for cancer care, the cost of prescription medications for anti-cancer drugs is something that patients have a more direct involvement in. So let's just briefly take a look at Danielle's first three sentences because they're great. First sentence, what does the paper discuss? What's the overall topic? Boom. Second sentence, where has the field been? Where has the topic been? Here's the trend that we're responding to. 3, what's the argument, the specific claim, the purpose of this project that it's trying to make? And Danielle, that assertive presentation, patients must be able to afford. Excellent. You're making a point, you're relating it to a specific trend in the field and contextualizing that trend within a broader topic. So you're positioning yourself within that discourse community really particularly and clearly. Great job. So sentence 4, one study found that on average patients initially pay around $1,000 as co-payment, and then it includes an endnote there for the Gainesman source. Although patients can apply for financial assistance, the cost of these medications is still extremely high. Despite the expensive cost of prescription anti-cancer medications, studies have found that patients are more willing to pay for expensive medications that have better clinical outcomes, and that patients are willing to, with another footnote. So, endnote, actually. Great job, Danielle. You're letting us know where that information is coming from. You're not quoting it, though, which is important for a conference abstract, which needs to have that succinct, precise, concise language. And you're not, it needs to be you. And it's you here, but you're showing us where it's from. Great job. Another thing that Danielle does really well here is if you look at her syntax, actually, coming back to the concision and coherence handout, if you notice the end of the sentence, although patients can apply for financial assistance, the cost of these medications is still extremely high. The next sentence begins, despite the expensive cost of prescription anti-cancer medications. So if you think back to the handout, it made a point about sentence structure. Introduce new information at the end, and then bridge to the next sentence by connecting to something that was brought up in the previous sentence. Danielle does that perfectly there. So especially in an abstract where you're trying to show a reader how you're thinking and what your logic is, that's really important to do, and she does that just fantastically. This paper addresses these issues in an attempt to highlight, so what are we trying to do here? By discussing the average amount of money, this paper attempts to open the discussion. This paper also explores, by discussing the average amount the patients pay, effective financial cost of patient. This paper highlights these issues as concerns that healthcare providers should be aware of, and do try to avoid ending a sentence in a preposition. I know it's a huge critique of your project, Danielle. Great job. I can tell that Danielle followed the template really clearly, and each of these sentences does something distinct. It contextualizes her topic within a larger, her particular question within a topic and within a discourse community. One of the good things about this abstract, I think, also is that it has a broad appeal. It demonstrates expert knowledge, but it could appeal to any of those different kind of sub-audiences within this big conference. So it's approachable, it reaches a lot of people, but it also demonstrates expert knowledge. So Danielle, I'll be really interested to see where you go in Module 4, but that's something for later. Let's take a look at one other example just so we see someone else's work and what they've done. So let's actually scroll up to the top, the very first one on this page. Chris, I'm going to try Chris Sinomieri. I'm trying. I hope I did that well. I really do. So let's take a look at Chris's. So Chris's is the third International Conference on Aging and Gerontology 2018. The CFP tells us that the main focus will be aging and elderly abuse, aging and geriatrics, aging and gerontology, and it goes on to list other specific concerns. Something that I would have you note about the CFP here that Chris is responding to is each of the listed focuses is aging or aged and something else. So what that's telling you is you could kind of look at each of those second parts of those categories and think of it with respect to aging. So for instance, a gerontologist would fit in very well here, but also they say aging biology. A biologist who researches aging would be welcome at this conference. Likewise, it says aging care management. Care managers would be welcome in this conference. So again, it's going to be interdisciplinary in terms of discourse communities, but the community of practice will have a lot of overlap there. And this is a great example of how communities of practice and discourse communities will practically mix out of shared concerns and experiences. So anyway, helpful to read the CFP that way. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at Chris's abstract, which he's titled Challenges in Pharmacological Treatment of Orthostatic Hypotension. Orthostatic hypotension has been an ongoing and growing issue in the geriatric population, where it is now both a mainstay and most prevalent. Orthostatic hypotension is often overlooked by both health professionals and patients, underestimating its severity in both symptoms and further complications. It can be severe enough to where patients are frightened to get up and move due to fear of syncope, leading to serious, sometimes fatal injuries. In addition, early research has also pointed towards a possible association between chronic orthostatic hypotension and negative cardiovascular and physiological outcomes. Heads up, Chris, you mentioned early research, so that would indicate that you're thinking of a specific source. You should either name it in the text or include an endnote there. Like Danielle did. Anytime you're mentioning, and this applies to everybody, this applies to anytime you're mentioning research or work, studies, you need a citation. It doesn't have to be in the text. It could be a footnote or endnote, but you have to show it because if you're mentioning it, it exists. So we need to know what it is. Continuing through here, the condition is not relatively difficult to diagnose. Clinicians can confidentially diagnose a patient after a few rounds of tests. Okay. The conflict arises with the management of orthostatic hypotension, specifically pharmacological treatment, which I'm more concerned and qualified to form an opinion on as a prospective pharmacist. Okay, so Chris, that's a really interesting move because you're announcing your particular approach to this topic. So you're positioning yourself within the discourse community here. You might do that a little more concisely in the sentence, but it is really important what you're doing in that you're positioning yourself with respect to these other groups that are going to be participating in this conference. Just like Danielle did, you're doing it here too. And when I say you might want to do it a little more concisely, what I mean here is you could even just take that little clause at the end and say, as a prospective pharmacist, take that, move it to the beginning of the sentence and make it what's called an introductory clause. So you might begin the sentence, as a prospective pharmacist, comma, pharmacological treatment as a prospective pharmacist, the pharmacological treatment of orthostatic hypertension interests me, particularly as pharmacological treatment often conflicts with management of it. So I think you could combine that sentence even maybe with the next one. The conflict is heavily complicated by identifying the cause of each patient's. Yeah, I think you want to foreground here your pharmacological approach a little bit. Lead those two sentences with your expertise and point to the specific role that pharmacological treatment plays and what your concern is, particularly with conflicting care management approaches, and then go straight to the literature. So I think if we can condense that middle part, this abstract might be a little bit more effective than it is now, although there's no huge problems with it. This is just a style revision. And in terms of following the model, Chris, you also did really well, and I can see that each stage of the abstract is doing something particular to respond to the CFP, and your EndNote format is well done, although again, we do need those tied back to that early research. We need to know what early research you're talking about. So those are my readings of two representative examples for this particular unit. The things to note, again, the structure of the abstract. These two classmates did a great job on it. In terms of the concision, the conciseness of the language, I think if there's like the example with Chris there should be a little bit instructive for some others that I've seen. Just make sure that you're really concise, particularly in those middle points as you're positioning yourself within your discourse community. Make sure that when you mention research, you provide a citation either in text or as an endnote. And make sure that you're responding really directly to the CFP. Both Chris and Danielle did a great job of that, so you can check them out if it's a little more approachable than the model that I gave you in the assignment sheet. So there you go. There's your Module 3 feedback, and I'll be in touch shortly with a Module 4 introduction.